United to fight the chaos. Gamekeeper Stephen Musk is on the front line of a battle which could cost him his livelihood. His shoot in Swatham in Norfolk is close to the Breckland Special Protection Area, SPA. After a last-minute change by DEFRA on the 31st of May 2023, he's now been forced to apply for a licence to allow him to release pheasants and red-leg partridges. DEFRA's record on granting individual licences is poor. If this one doesn't arrive, Stephen says he can't accept the birds he's ordered and it could be the end of his business.
On tenterhooks really. Obviously if we get rejected for a licence or we have to do anything that incurs more costs on what is already a tight season, unfortunately, the commercial side of the shooting does keep me here. If that disappears, so will my position. I've worked long and hard to be where I am, and I wouldn't want it to end overnight through someone else's decision.
Fieldsports groups have banded together to launch a judicial review against DEFRA and Natural England. They're calling for an urgent review of GL43, the general licence that covers game bird releasing around European protected sites. PACEC, the Countryside Alliance, the National Gamekeepers Organisation and Aim to Sustain are among the signatories on a letter to DEFRA Secretary Trace Coffey, calling for the government to solve the crisis it created with the last-minute change.
Our reaction is that it's basically complete chaos because the announcement was dropped at the 11th hour, effectively the 31st of May. There's been no time to plan, there was no consultation, and it's left the whole shooting community really in complete limbo.
PACEC says if shoots can't get individual licences, they can't release birds and there'll be no shooting. DEFRA will have caused problems to hundreds of shoots, thousands of businesses, and could cost millions of pounds throughout the sector.
Natural England or the government estimated that there'd be 42 shoots affected around the country. We know it's far more than that. I'm personally North York Moors based. My guess would be in the North York Moors that it would be over 100 shoots in the North York Moors alone. I would think it would be into the many hundreds around England. Now, the reason why it's probably more than they thought is because there is more shooting that goes on. We have gone through that period we discussed before of COVID where shoots haven't been able to get going, or potentially maybe shoots had problems with getting birds with avian influenza last year. So we knew this was going to be a busier year than previous years.
A huge impact on the business, or it certainly has the potential to. And depending on how the licences are granted, it could have an absolutely catastrophic effect. We're sandwiched between the Yorkshire Dales and the Yorkshire Moors, which makes up the vast majority of our client base on the game front, and we estimate that 80% of our clients either release into an SPA.
It's all about bird flu. Fieldsports groups believe the change in licence conditions starts at DEFRA's Natural England agency, which was responsible for the 2019 general licences fiasco. Between Natural England and DEFRA, a similar disaster is unfolding, this time because of DEFRA's avian influenza risk assessment, which dates from December 2022. The high rates of bird flu at the time led DEFRA to conclude there was a possible risk of the transmission of highly pathogenic avian influenza from released game birds to wild birds during the summer of 2022. A year later, the change to the general licences is based on the belief that that remains the case, and the new rules will remain in place until summer 2025.
There have been no recorded cases of birds being released already infected with avian influenza, and there's no reason to suspect that it's likely to happen in the future. So to use this as a reason to restrict releases is completely without foundation.
Last year, when Fieldsports groups met DEFRA to review the GL43 licence, they asked and were assured that DEFRA would give as much notice as possible to any changes it planned to make.
What DEFRA don't seem to grasp is that shooting, like many businesses or like many pastimes in the countryside, that they're a year-round investment. So the planning for the shoots starts September, October the season before, certainly by January. So these shoots had ordered the birds, they were ready to go. The guns have probably paid a deposit. The hotels, the restaurants, they're all booked up. People are excited and looking forward to having a game bird season that isn't impacted by COVID. Hopefully, wasn't going to be too impacted by bird flu or avian influenza. And yet, at the last minute, they were then told that actually these plans need to effectively go on hold because you now need to apply for a license that they weren't expecting.
Stephen isn't sure how long he'll have to wait for his licence.
Currently, I estimated around about £90,000 already invested into deposits on game birds, game covers, wages. The list is quite significant. There's lots of little things that go into it and costs that you don't really even think about. So yeah, and that is all lost if we can't carry on shooting.
Despite last-minute appeals from Fieldsports groups, DEFRA made the change. Now PACEC and others are taking legal action to persuade DEFRA to reissue GL43, with SPAs included, alongside other European areas, to prevent a wildlife welfare crisis and economic collapse of a range of rural businesses.
I know the huge amount of work that's gone in to a lot of these shoots in these areas, investing in pens and making pens bigger and looking at numbers, and kind of really doing everything properly. For it to potentially all be taken away like this is just unbelievable, really. So I think it's like I say, hopefully it will go ahead, and hopefully it's just sort of a last minute stumbling block. But the uncertainty of it all is really quite worrying.
Meanwhile, Wild Justice is also taking legal action over the GL43 licence. It says it wants last year's GL43 to stay revoked. Stephen says he won't risk releasing birds without a licence, as the penalties are too steep.
As I've heard, it's unlimited fines, potential custodial sentences, it'd be a loss of firearms. I am the licence holder, I'm the one that's applied for it, so it would be my firearms certificate going forward gone. All in all, we're not prepared to do it. The stewardship, everything that's at risk, it's too much. But then the loss also on the other side is loss of jobs.
In a statement, DEFRA doubles down on its bird flu defence, with claims that its scientific assessment is robust. It claims that Natural England will process applications within a month, though that is not the experience of gamekeepers. Natural England maintains a strongly preservationist stance and anti-conservation, turning down most wildlife management applications.
If I'm honest, I don't agree with it. We were in the epicentre last year of the bird flu epidemic. We had seagulls, lots of wild birds dead on reservoirs, in and around pheasants. We didn't see any issue in our game birds at all, partridge or pheasants, and we saw no cross contamination into the wild bird stock either way. So I don't believe it would be an issue. I think actually the detriment would be to stop the shooting rather than worry about bird flu, which is in the wild bird population.
Shooting groups are determined to fight for shooters and gamekeepers, such as Stephen, to stop the sector being crippled. For more help, see the links below.